but just wanted to say good morning and welcome to the April meeting of the Contra Costa Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force. We've got quite a few objectives today. Part of what we're going to be doing is giving our usual economic update. That's how we're going to start. But then we're going to spend some time actually. Patience is going to be joining me and kind of co-presenting what we heard and what we learned from a meeting last week of all the regional Bay Area's regional equitable economic recovery efforts. And the sneak preview for that is we're all talking about the same stuff. So even though our processes have been a little bit different, I think it definitely, both Patience and I agree, it really validated the work that this group has been doing and continues to do, and our desire to really move toward action. And today really is a day talking about action. We're going to spend some time in breakout rooms. We're going to set it up and then go into some breakout rooms to talk about potential asks of this group of Measure X funding. And then we're going to have some time to do some report outs and then adjourn. But I want to, I don't think there's anybody new among folks here. I just want to make sure people have a chance to see each other. And certainly for all those of you who helped out with our convening last week, I just wanted to say thanks. We had a really great group of folks that both participated and that helped present and then also attended. So really appreciating you for that right now. And so we'll just go ahead and dive in and get started. See, I was vamping a little bit, Sharon, while you got back to your desk. So I'm glad that you're with us. So we're gonna get started. So just to give the quick economic update, and again, it's hard to do this in 10 minutes, but we're gonna do our typical report here. So you'll see a really good trend for California, down a notch. What's important to note about this is that there were actual jobs created. So if you want to go to the next slide, the unemployment rate wasn't improving simply because people were leaving the job search, which was part of the trend, which has been part of the recovery story, particularly women leaving the workforce to deal with their care responsibilities. But we are seeing an actual increase in jobs, which is great. Locally here in Contra Costa, the trend then also shows that we are headed in the right direction. So you'll see from the next slide that we've got the unemployment trending in the right direction, which is really nice to see. Now, granted, for those 36,300 folks that are still unemployed, that's not a great improvement, but we still have a lot of work to do for them. But the bottom line about the employment picture is that things are improving. So in addition to looking at those metrics, I could dive into a lot of other economic data, but we'll just sort of share this, that increased vaccinations and positive COVID trends are clearly helping the economy recover. And just yesterday, consumer confidence data out underscores this positive trend, right? So consumers' assessments of their current situation rose sharply this month, and it nearing pre-pandemic levels. So as expectations for the future, so the consumers' expectations for the future neared previous records. So consumers' assessment of current business conditions and their own incomes were stronger. So without getting into the details, so there's a jobs plentiful index, which rose sharply on the national level, while the jobs hard to get gauge fell. Suggesting that consumers see strength in the labor market. So overall consumer confidence was even better than expected in April, with the outlook for consumption on its most solid footing since the pandemic began. So as vaccines help reopenings, we can expect a surge in services spending, followed by a longer readjustment period as consumers who can afford to do so shift their spending patterns back towards services and away from goods, reversing a trend seen since the pandemic hit last year. But that will also reinforce the hiring and the employment in the service sector. So that's sort of I will limit, for the sake of our agenda, I will limit how much economic data I share, but I'm always happy to answer questions and share more things offline. But assuming that your internet is in a good shape, I wanted to go ahead and invite Lindy into the conversation. Lindy did such a stellar job in really quarterbacking and coming up with the game plan for our half-day convening last week with childhood early childhood education experts, and also featuring a keynote from Michael Tubbs. So, Lindy, you want to give a little bit of a snapshot about what happened last week?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here with us this morning. So we held a wonderful convening. Some of our leaders, local leaders, came and joined us to talk about the importance of early childhood education and really that impact and impact economically, but also on child poverty. And it was a great conversation. Camilla Rand joined us from First Five and did a really great presentation that is actually available on our website. So if anyone would like to go back and visit that, we have it available. And then actually we were joined by Devorah Levine, who is the new executive director of the Dina Margaret Lesher Foundation. She also spoke to the importance of capacity building and what volume, is kind of needed to help to escalate these issues. She also just talked to us about philanthropists and why philanthropists are engaged in this issue, especially locally. There's actually a whole group of local philanthropists who meet to talk about this specifically. And then thankfully, our Letty Kazan and John Jones from Cocoa Kids joined us in a conversation that Kristen led, where we just really dove into some of the questions around this and also gave them kind of the traditional magic wand to ask about what they would change if they had the ability to change anything overnight. So it was a great conversation. I think some of these slides just kind of give you a little taste of it, but it is available if you'd like to go back and watch it. And we took some of that conversation and shaped it into some of what we're going to be talking about today, both in the letter that we may be signing on to the budget leaders here in the state, and also to some of our recommendations around Measure X. So really appreciated everyone who joined us for that early conversation. And then we got a great keynote from Michael Tubbs, who I think everyone felt was really authentic and inspiring. And we actually have a small clip to show some of you today. So it was a great convening and really appreciate everyone who's able to be involved. And like I said, I think it really helped us shape some recommendations.
Thanks, Lindy. You want to go roll the clip?
He looked at me and he said, "What are you prepared to do today so a child 50 years from now has more opportunity?" And I think that's the question that motivates me every day. And I think that's really the question that motivates this group. And it's not about sitting and just talking about all the ways things are broken and wrong, although those can be therapeutic, and that's a good first step. It's not about sort of wishing things would get better, disattached from like our actual agency and ability to do something. It's really about what are we committed to do individually, each and every day, and collectively, without a guarantee that what we're doing will work, right? Without the benefit of a crystal ball that says this will be perfect, but with the realization that the status quo doesn't work, that the status quo is actually untenable, and that we have I would argue, moral responsibility to do something to improve it. Even if it's not a perfect improvement, even if it doesn't get us to 100% of where we need to be, but it's something that's iteratively better. And that's the question I'll leave with you all. Just what are we prepared to do? What are you prepared to do? So that 50 years later, the conversation in Contra Costa County is different. And it's not about sort of disparity. It's not about inequity. It's about shared prosperity.
I'm grateful to have that Zoom clip. And so Michael Tubbs is the former mayor of Stockton, has gotten a lot of national attention because of the recent study out about his targeted guaranteed income pilot project, that really showed some positive trends for folks. He's truly an evangelist for a guaranteed income. And I think, and we'll get to this in a minute, but, certainly opening up the possibilities for whether or not we should recommend a guaranteed income pilot in Contra Costa, and to see what that would look like and what some of the potential for that. So again, thank you, Lindy, for organizing that, and really appreciate the county's support in pulling that together. Are there any questions about the Michael Tubbs convening before we dive into it's not the worst thing that Patience and I are a couple minutes ahead of schedule before we dive into the next thing, because that situation in a meeting where you have way too many slides for the time that you're allowed. So I'm just going to put that out there. We have 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Patience into the conversation. So Patience Afudu, the interim executive director of the Contra Costa County Workforce Development Board and our partner in this important work. So we're going to jointly present some important material that was reviewed at a regional convening last Thursday afternoon, organized by the San Francisco Foundation. So so before we kind of dive into the slides, but Patience and I represented Contra Costa at this convening of key leaders involved in various economic recovery efforts that started to form a year ago at the start of the pandemic. So 3 of these efforts were led by big city mayors, so San Jose, Oakland, and San Francisco. Representing these efforts at the convenings on Thursday were these 3 mayors, Sam Liccardo, Libby Schaaf, and London Breed, respectively. I had 2 conversations with the lead staffer from the San Francisco Foundation about our work in the task force here in Contra Costa to share our approach and our progress, which turns out is very consistent with these other efforts. So Patience and I will be sharing some highlights of what was presented at the meeting, including excerpts from 3 presentations. So the first presentation is from Policy Link's Equitable Atlas on the status of the economic impacts of COVID and where we are at in terms of the recovery. The second presentation is a summary of the shared priorities from these different economic recovery efforts, including those led by the 3 mayors. And then finally, some information from some polling by EMC Research on public opinion about all these relevant issues. So Patience and I are going to jointly present this. I'm also going to attempt to be the one who actually shares my screen, which is something that I always lean on Mark for, but I'm going to try to handle it myself. So I'm just going to, in advance, ask for your indulgence as I do this. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the first slide here, and I'm going to try to do this from the beginning. How do let's see, because I want you to see this full screen. So
you click slideshow at the top, Kristen?
Except that my Zoom bar is covering that toolbar. Is there another way to get, like, I can't see the slideshow function.
In the lower right-hand corner, next to your Zoom bar, to the left of that is a little presentation button.
To the right of the one that looks like an open book.
To the right of the one that looks like an open book. Oh, yeah.
Click there.
On a pedestal, good.
Yes, team, you talked me through it. Seriously, cheers to you. Okay, like we have been through this, people. Thank you. All right, so what we're going to just show you just a handful of the slides that were given to us. What we've done is we have posted all 3 of these slide decks. So I just want to really make it plain. We did not prepare these slide decks. This first one is from Policy Link. And so they presented about their work. But again, this was really these 3 foundations supporting this effort. And so, but we included the title slide for each of these presentations just so that you can clearly identify it, so that when you want to go look at the entire presentations, you can. These are really text heavy slides, and there's no way we're going to get to it in 10 minutes. So, so just as a starting point, I think that, you know, all the conversations that we have had about who is struggling the most in terms of low income communities of color in Contra Costa, right? And really focusing on where the COVID rates have been highest. You know, San Pablo gets called out in this report, you know, as a COVID hotspot and as a community that's really suffered a lot. And but they really did talk about, you know, so there are these 3 metrics shared on the side in terms of the low income workers of color that are more likely to face automation, more likely to deal with unemployment, and you know, when compared to white workers. And so again, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but it was just really clear that, you know, how goes Contra Costa is in the same spot as the rest of the Bay Area in terms of who's most vulnerable, and that's really consistent. So I wanted to go ahead and so that I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Patience now to go ahead and go over some of this data, and to highlight why I'm excited that Patience is co-presenting this with me is to really elevate what we're doing in Contra Costa and what the Workforce Development Board has done and what the county's doing, so that so that you all have a better sense of that. So go ahead, Patience.
Yes. So thank you, Kristen, and thanks everyone for being here with us. In most Bay Area counties, low-wage workers experience the largest decline according to this report. So the low-wage workers experience declined, while high-wage workers were much less impacted. In Contra Costa specifically, 33% of low-wage workers lost employment, while 12% of middle-wage workers lost employment. Contra Costa small businesses were hit with closure and declining revenue. 41% of Contra Costa businesses closed, while businesses in Contra Costa lost 33% in revenue during this period. So on this note, the Workforce Board implemented several responses to small businesses, including the following programs to help with this. We had the layoff aversion program, which we call the LAF Fund. We did a grant program with 100,000. We had about 156 applications, and we were able to fulfill 26 of them with up to $5,000 to support small businesses. We instituted a California Employer Association hotline and the Bounce Back Contra Costa website and information. All those details can be found on our website. As we go through these presentations, I'll be giving you more information on what we've done and then a reference to our website so that you can see the details. As Kristen said, 10 minutes is not enough to share all this. Next, Kristen, over to you. That'll be Kristen.
I did it. I thought I was immune from doing that move, guys, but I was starting to talk while I was on mute. Okay, so building on what Patience just said, another thing that was highlighted around the Equity Atlas was talking about the continued problem of food insecurity and particularly the percentage of Black adults experiencing food insecurity, but then also really highlighting the significant percentage of Latinx students that are struggling with internet access during the pandemic. Now, there were some things that were highlighted. Mayor Schaaf was really excited to point out, and this also points to why I'm so glad that with this work, we had a whole webinar dedicated to how Oakland has expanded its internet access and all the stuff that they were doing with their citywide Wi-Fi. So again, another hat tip to Lindy for setting that up for December. But Oakland went from having 12% of their low-income students had truly a digital solution of a device and connected, high-speed broadband to 99% of the low-income kids in Oakland having that, and just really was proud of that achievement and that accomplishment. So that was something that was lifted up in this. So, again, I want to point you to, so again, San Pablo is highlighted as one of the communities that has been hardest hit, low-income communities around with the pandemic and high rates of COVID. And so I did want to, again, highlight that with continuing struggling food insecurity, it's great that Contra Costa County did participate in the Great Plates program in terms of supporting small businesses to help feed seniors. And so that is an important thing. Feel free, Debbie, if you have something to say about that, go ahead, light up the chat. But that's going to be, so that's something that's definitely worth highlighting. And then there are, again, not every community has had the kind of uptake in closing the digital divide and the success that Oakland has had. And so again, this just points to the continued need to focus on the digital divide as something. So again, I'm not going to go through and look at this, read the text on this slide or go through the different machinations here, but I do want to there is a lot of rich data in this particular slide deck from PolicyLink about all this. So then I'm going to pass it over to Patience to talk about affordable housing and homelessness prevention.
Thank you. So according to the report, 137,500 Bay Area households are at risk of eviction and indebtedness. The average household is 3,600 behind in rent, and and Contra Costa County is near that. Rent debt is especially hitting low-income households and make up roughly half of all rent debt. Black and Latinx residents are disproportionately impacted and likely to experience homelessness. The Workforce Board is engaged in various activities to address the problem of homelessness in Contra Costa and the region. Our core WIOA programs serve homeless individuals specifically. Some of our other activities include the Workforce Accelerator Fund, the WAF 8, which is innovating with human-centered design for homeless and workforce system redesign. This is part of a system level effort to align homelessness and workforce services across the East Bay region by partnering with agencies. Some of the agencies, some of you are here today: Martinez Adults, Lived Experience Consultants, Hope Solution, Rubicon Programs, Spark Point, H3, and Shelters Inc. These are some of the agencies that are working with us in Contra Costa to combat these homelessness issues. Also, on the workforce level, the state level, there are advocates. In our advocacy, we have SB 424 for corporate tax credit, which is to support homeless individuals, as well as AB 675, employment and homelessness related as well. So all these are advocating for supporting homeless individuals and also to give tax credit to employers up to $10,000 to hire from the specific group. So you can learn more about the bills. I believe Mark might put the bill numbers in the chat group for us so that you could learn more about all that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Patience. So in terms of kind of soldiering on, so the second set of slides, so again, I want you to focus on this color scheme and the fact that this is the deck that was prepared by Estelano Advisors. So right, this entire deck, which is really, really substantive and thick, lives in, we put that on our website for you to review. So what this did was look at the different prepared, published reports that had been done in these different places. Our work was included anecdotally through the conversations I had with the San Francisco Foundation, but because we haven't produced a report, that really wasn't part of this work, because this has been really action oriented and is continuing to evolve. But we hope that we get to continue this report and continue this work and potentially produce a report. But this is sort of this summary, a distillation of what has been in these different places. And so they categorize them in 3 ways: the small business and workforce development strategies, supporting underinvested communities, and affordable housing and tenant protections, right? So it's very much aligned with the Policy Link report, and but then talks about these different strategies, right? So there's the 4 strategies under small business and workforce development. We'll call out, grants and forgivable loans, worker protection, and really access to good quality jobs and training. But you can't, that number one thing, culturally competent technical assistance, I think is just so in line with what we heard from the focus groups, what we heard from what businesses need. And again, these are all aligned with the things that we've been focused on here at the task force. And so then there's this bundle of ways to support underinvested communities, 3 of which are different digital inclusion strategies. But if you look at cash assistance and guaranteed income is one of the strategies, and universal childcare access. So that's, we've been really trying to get smarter about all of that and think about how we can really build back better in Contra Costa and really support that entire network. And then again, in the 2 strategies around affordable housing and tenant protections, for forgivable loans and mortgage forbearance as a strategy, and Project Home Key hotel conversions. So, so I just wanted to kind of lift up those 11 strategies that are certainly consistent with what we've been talking about here. And I am mindful of time. The third deck is this EMC research about attitudes on racial equity and regional recovery. And so you'll see that there's this is a really rich slide deck about public opinion. And I encourage you to go, check out the whole thing. There's a disconnect between, right? So people realize that valuing racial and economic diversity and inclusion is really important, but that a majority feel that the Bay Area is currently falling short when it comes to equal treatment of people of different races or incomes. But what I wanted to turn it over to Patience to talk about, when asked about the highest priority in terms of COVID-19 recovery, I want Patience to talk about these results. Go ahead, Patience. Home stretch.
Yes, I know we're out of time now. So, but it's important to reflect that economic recovery and jobs comes at 19% in terms of priorities for this. And then we have the COVID vaccine, 12%, homelessness, 12%, affordable housing, and then we have education. So, our collaboration with the EHSD Contra Costa collaboration with Economic Recovery Task Force that Kristen and the team are putting together is part of the county's effort to serve our business community during this recovery period. And I'm sure that most of you will agree with me that Kristen and the team are doing a fabulous job with this work. And we are highly hoping that this work continues, because this recovery is a long way from being over. We just got started, and it's very important that we all put our heads together and bring the key partners to the table and businesses to hear their voice and begin to implement some of these suggestions, recommendations from different groups to ensure that our county recovers. On the Workforce Development Board front, I'm going to be very brief because we're out of time, but we do have a lot of programs, again, that we said, in addition to what Kristen is doing. We do have programs for subsidized employment towards the development of skills. We have direct assistance and supportive services to pay for monthly expenses such as rent, transportation, and training. We have subsidized training and career pathways. And we're convening public officials and workforce partners in different groups. We also have the Health Ambassador Program in partnership with Health Services. And then we are, as noted, we already have the WARF program with the partners, some of them at the table today, doing a great job to see how we can help our homeless community members. The Workforce Board is really engaged in education. As a matter of fact, we have Chancellor Brian Rees coming to the Workforce Board on May 4th to discuss how the community colleges will collaborate better with the Workforce Board and EHSD, as well as we have the Supervisor Burgess coming on May 4th as well to the full board meeting to tell us how the county can further support the programs and the recovery efforts, because the Supervisor Burgess is very heavy on economic development. So we are hoping that with her interest in economic development, the Chancellor's interest in collaborating and helping with this recovery process, and then having Kristen and the team put all this together with your support and involvement, that Contra Costa will get out of this. So we have demographics and all the other stuff, but I encourage you to go to our website and attend our board meetings. And we continue to support this program that Kristen is putting together so that we can be on top of this. Thank you.
Great job, Patience. That was a lot to cover in a short amount of time. This slide I kept in the deck to share just around the idea that there is a lot of support around providing a guaranteed income for people to pay their bills and to meet their individual needs during the pandemic, and also some other important supports that you'll see here. So then I did want to just point out that 16% of the interviews were from Contra Costa County of this. And so, there is a whole slide deck about this, but I know that was a lot to cover, but I want to transition now to then, I do want to mention, so coming out of this was a budget letter to both, to the budget chairs in the state assembly and the state senate that talks about all of these shared priorities. And so, and I was quite comfortable that the economic partnership in all of this work signed on and is supporting that. But what we want to do is find out if you guys are comfortable with the equitable economic under this umbrella of signing on in support of that joint letter. Again, it would be from the entire region, from these three mayors, from all the different partners and the foundations, this cross-sector approach seeking some direction at the state level to support our efforts. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Lindy for the next set of slides, talking about this and talking about Measure X and then setting us up for the breakout rooms. And we're 6 minutes behind schedule, which is not an insurmountable thing to make up. So hang in there with us, people.
Hi, everyone. Hold on just one moment while I pull this up. But I'm going to just quickly share my screen to share this letter, which most of you have hopefully had a chance to see. We did include it with the agenda for this meeting. And it looks like this. So hopefully you had a chance to review it. And each of them, each of the priorities is outlined in bold and then given, like description is given below. Hold on one moment. I'm going to take us out of that. Okay, and so this letter was crafted and is addressed to the Assembly Budget Chair and the Senate Budget Chair, and is a list of priorities for how they should direct some of the funds of the budget. We're hoping that all of you had, like I mentioned, a chance to read it and look through it and are supportive of those. Many of them do align with a lot of what we've identified here, and include things like technical assistance for very small businesses, as well as broadband support, support for early childhood, things like that. So it aligns pretty similarly to a lot of the work that we've been doing here. But we wanted to make sure that all of you were supportive and comfortable with us signing on to it as a task force before we did so. So I'm going to actually launch a poll really quickly. Give me one moment. And just, this is just a way for you all to engage. Hopefully you see it up on your screen now. If you could just give us your consent, or if you're in disagreement or would like to abstain, that's fine too. If you're choosing to abstain and want that to be counted in our minutes, please go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay. Thank you so much. Just really quickly, I'll show you. Those were our results. If you were not able to vote and wanted to vote for whatever reason, you also can put that yes or no in the chat. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and go over some slides really quick. Okay, so I'd also like to talk about Measure X. So hopefully most of you have, at least at this point, heard about Measure X. It was the sales tax measure that was voted on last year. It was approved here in Contra Costa County. The Board of Supervisors then created an advisory body. It's called the Community Advisory Board. They got a lot of applications for this board. There was a lot of interest. Our very own Sharon Jenkins is one of the voting members, as well as Ruth Hernandez, who's also here with us, I believe. So a few different members of this Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force, and Debbie Toth. I don't want to forget anyone here, but there's a great group of people who've really dedicated their time to being part of this, and they meet every Wednesday from 5 to 6:30. So they'll do weekly presentations until the end of June. So it's essentially a listening tour. And then after the listening tour concludes, they'll go into what they're calling deliberations. On May 19th is the meeting we're hoping to submit a letter towards, and that's actually their safety net meeting. So they're including jobs and income, public benefits under safety net, though I imagine there will be quite a lot of other issues discussed under that as well, because as many of us know, the social safety net is a broad net. There is a chair of this community advisory board, Mariana Moore. Now, Mariana also chaired the effort to get the sales tax measure on the ballot. So she was actually part of the group that worked on creating the needs assessment for the initial ballot measure. So she's got a lot of experience with this and has kind of been involved from the beginning. There's also a co-chair. Her name is BK Williams. She works in West County. So we want to talk specifically about this May 19th meeting because we feel like a lot of the priorities that have been discussed here at the Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force really align with that meeting and its intention. The meeting process will be as such. There's going to be a panel of speakers, which will include county staff, organizations, and also they're hoping some consumers or residents with lived experience in whatever that issue area might be. For example, the week before this May 19th meeting, they'll be talking about mental health and behavioral health. And so they hope to have some consumers and those living with lived experience. Each panelist will have about 10 minutes to present. There'll be a question and answer period and then public comment. And all of the presenters are being asked to come with some priorities and recommendations and also some bold ideas. So I think we'll hear quite a range of things at all of these meetings, and I imagine each meeting will differ slightly. But I think it's important to highlight that there will be a public comment period at each. So here at the Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force, we are proposing to send a letter to the advisory board under this social safety net meeting on May 19th with four potential areas of focus. I'm seeing there's a question in the chat, but I can't actually open the chat while I'm doing a presentation. So if it's for me, I'll happily answer it as soon as I'm done. So there's four potential areas of focus. The first is a guaranteed income pilot. I should also specify really quick, while this group is being asked to make recommendations, they're not being asked to create a budget. So the group will be asked to put forward recommendations and priorities and to provide some context for why they're making the recommendations that they are. And more than likely, it will be much more specific than just our first priority is healthcare, right? It will be more specific than that, but it won't be so specific as 25.2 million to the enterprise fund for the hospital. So they're in kind of a unique space where they're being asked to, again, make recommendations, but not create a specific financial budget. The Board of Supervisors, of course, gets to make the final decision on all of this, but they've looked to this advisory group to really help to shape the priorities. So the Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force and the staff here thought that these would be 4 great areas of focus to advise the Measure X advisory body to consider priorities. One is a guaranteed income pilot. We talked a lot about this at our half-day convening. We think this would be a great way to really serve those most in need, which is what this sales tax measure was intended to do. We also think that it would allow for us to see how that works within our county and to think about what a great targeted group might be. The second priority is early education, and I provided some specifics here because obviously early education has already been outlined as a priority for this measure, but what might that look like seemed important to hone in on. So increased slots for Head Start and Early Head Start and related staff, and then matching grants to community providers to allow for increased capacity, including the addition of sliding scale spots in the community. These grants might also be used for other things, and I think that that's where expertise from our ECE partners would be really beneficial, and also information from the group, the actual advisory board, in regards to what their interest might be, could also be important. I say that because it may be possible that some of these grants would be better used to help build actual infrastructure capacity or cultural competency capacity. They might not all be used for sliding scale, but really this is also an acknowledgement that we need to increase the capacity in our early education infrastructure in Contra Costa County, and that while Head Start and Early Head Start absolutely should be a component of that, we also have a lot of community advisors who could be part of increasing that capacity. The third is economic development concentration, specifically technical assistance to very small businesses. This kind of follows some of what is in that letter that we just approved, and really concentrates on thinking and being responsive to some of the focus groups we heard from here in this Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force and their need for support and assistance, and somewhere where they can answer and ask questions of each other and of those who have expertise in areas such as tax or payroll or HR. And again, we wanted to concentrate this on very small businesses and very likely on minority owned or businesses that fall into that kind of larger umbrella of minority owned. The fourth recommendation is around workforce development, and our specific recommendations here are technical assistance and support for companies and organizations to create paid internships. We heard from our first half-day convening how important work-based learning is and how critical paid internships specifically can really be in advancing someone's exposure to a career and opportunity, and or getting them kind of that opening door into that career or opportunity. And that oftentimes if those internships are not paid, they really exclude a lot of members of the workforce. So we wanted to make sure that that was something that was considered and thought about. We also wanted to look at the expansion of the paid internships that already exist within the county infrastructure itself, specifically potentially support for the Health Careers Pathway program. One of the things we've talked a lot about here in the Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force is the importance of the healthcare workforce, and the importance of that specifically here in Contra Costa County, and providing more opportunities into that workforce is really important and kind of speaks to the program that Patients is partnered with health services on. And so we want to see more support for those kinds of programs. And we think that the Health Careers Pathway program could be a really good model for other programs within the county. So those are the 4 recommendations that we wanted you all to consider. And we're hoping that we can break out into breakout rooms for a few minutes and provide everyone the opportunity to reflect on these, kind of get your thoughts and opinions, but also just see if anyone had any questions they could answer within those groups with each other, so that we can hopefully move forward in writing a letter for May 19th that supports these initiatives or focus areas. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other's faces. Hi, everyone. And break you all out into breakout rooms. Is there any questions in the meantime?
Hey, Lindy, do we know what the budget looks like? I mean, how much will Measure X raise?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question, Patty. There will be around 90 million this year, we believe, though it's possible in other years it might be slightly less. So the county might decide to budget for slightly less in regards to things they know they want to be ongoing programs. But this year they anticipate about 90 million. There's also about 22 million of one-time funds.
Okay. Thanks.
Lindy, is this PowerPoint available for us? or could it
It
be
will
that-
be following the meeting, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to send everyone out into breakout rooms, and we'll close those in probably about 7 or 8 minutes. Welcome back, everyone.
Sorry, I'm laughing because we all just felt this like, no, we need more time. Like, so I'm just sorry. I don't mean to.
All of our faces froze on.
We were like, and so, yeah, so, we, you know, it is always hard when we're trying to keep these meetings too. But I know that in our group, and not everybody had a chance to talk. So, you know, I could put BL on the spot if you wanted to share anything else. You know, what we heard is support for that as a framework, but an interest in seeing some of the details more developed about what those things look like. And, you know, Elisa was just talking about the importance of pathways in and out of sort of specifically the CNA turnover rate is 129% per year. And so in terms of talking about healthcare pathways. So I always learn so much during these meetings from you all very smart people. So so Lindy, how do you want to do this report back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there's anyone else who really wanted to speak to something that happened in their meeting, I think please go ahead and raise your hand. We do have a few minutes. We can certainly kind of speak to that. I do just want to highlight though, that while I'm happy to continue this conversation, it would possibly make it impossible for us to give comment under the May 19th date if we were to not choose to move forward with these recommendations, which is okay. There will be other opportunities to possibly give feedback or to provide recommendations, but I do think that meeting.
I think there's total whole cloth momentum that we should submit 100%, right? I mean, like nod your heads and like, or, you know, speak now if you think, but I think part of it is yes. And let's make sure it's really informed, that we actually know some things, and it's not just, you know, that we really
absolutely
try to put a little bit of detail into it to guide folks in the right direction and to be persuasive. And so.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Letty, I saw that you had raised your hand. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Okay, our group believed in the 4 priority areas that were outlined, but we just highlighted the fact that all of these are really integrated, and we cannot look at one without really looking at progress from the other area. And so the priorities are there, but there's also that need to the thinking that one cannot really progress without the others. So just an integrated approach to and viewpoint into it.
Yeah, and also I did want to just flag to Keith. Keith Archuleta put it in the chat as well, but thought that it would be good to add nonprofit employers as potential recipients of the technical assistance. You know, that it's not just for small businesses, but that nonprofits, and particularly economic development and workforce development, involved nonprofits be part of that conversation. So
absolutely.
All right, you're here. Anyone from any sector have any reflections about the 4 priorities, or what we want to add?
I just dropped a couple notes from our group into the chat. Some people were speaking up. So if anyone else that I didn't capture what you said in our group, and there also was a second to Keith's comment, and also just a note that before they submit, if they were going to have to officially sign on, they'd like to see the language before they do that, rather than just in a unless it really is just the bullets. But that was
we can definitely share, you know, send that out to the full task force, and so that you can see that. Any to put our 2 go ahead, Keith, you put your hand up.
Yeah, just real briefly, I think 3 of the 4 components, I think there's a lot of shared language and support for. I think for the income, guaranteed income piece, I think that needs a little bit of background on what it is and what it isn't, because I think that's not as much in the common language as it should be. And so I think we may need to spend a little more time on describing what that is, that it's not a welfare program, et cetera, and that it's and what it is. I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I would just wanted to add to that. One thing that's come up in a lot of the work that we see is when people are getting assistance over $500, what that's generating in terms of tax and otherwise, and how for some families that means they step away from it. So in San Pablo, we've never done the guaranteed income thing, but we have Measure Q funds that we're able to spend for the most disproportionately impacted. But what we've done is get those funds and pay vendors directly on behalf of participants, so they never receive it. But there is a certain guarantee, like for childcare, right? We can't do it for a ton of families, but it's for those families like going into training or who are trying to go from part-time work to full-time work. So there are little nuances that we will have to think about in terms of equity, of not accidentally eliminating people because
Yeah,
of
the
the way we
benefits
set it up.
cliffs and other things. Yep.
Yeah, there's always a lot of unintended consequences.
Yep. Thanks, Leslie. Okay. Mark, I just put out this point about Sharon emphasizing, innovation, which I think is really, really important to highlight as well. With 4 minutes left, is there something, Lindy, that you want to add as a closing remark on this as we wrap, or guidance? You've been such a Measure X warrior for us at EBLC and the Economic Partnership. I'm so appreciative of all the time that you're putting in on this effort.
Absolutely. And I appreciate everyone's feedback here. And I think all of the comments are really helpful and will be helpful in crafting a letter, which, as Mark put in the chat, was requested, and I think we certainly can do. I do just want to say that I think that suggesting bold ideas and making those a priority for the county, I think is something they're really looking for in this group, and at the same time aren't necessarily going to draw the specifics on how all of that would work in each situation. And I'd say that just to say that I don't think the group has the ability time-wise to do so. So I think that setting forward a priority such as matching grants for the community, we might not be, as an advisory group, tasked with exactly putting together the specifications of how those matching grants would work. And I only say that to just let everyone in this group know that we could be involved in some recommendations, and there still would be an ongoing process in how that recommendation actually plays out within Contra Costa County.
Cool. All right. Well, I just want to invite, I don't know if Tamina to put you on the spot, or Patience, or Maura, if you wanted to add anything from just your reflections on today and what we talked about. Go ahead, Tamina.
Sure, I'll just reflect on kind of what I shared with our group, is that at EHSD, we've been talking about the guaranteed income pilot and that it's a great idea. And we want to make sure that it doesn't cancel out any of the public benefits that folks are already receiving, doesn't make them ineligible for subsidized housing, does not, create, the tax burden that folks have been mentioning. So in our group, we really talked about, looking at the end customer, and are they better at the end? And is this something that they actually want? And so I don't know how Stockton did it. I would love to hear how Stockton figured out, kind of like navigated the federal and state hurdles to make sure that the money actually got to folks and wasn't just something that replaced money that would have been there initially. But we just really need to keep that kind of plan and that part and really investigate that so that we lay that out properly in our in our letter. I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think that as we close, not to cut you off, Patience, inviting you in and then cutting you off, I think we would love to have, and this is Lindy's suggestion, we would love to have someone speak on behalf of the task force on May 19th, if anyone is willing. Don't all speak at once. You can put your hands up. You can put yourself in the chat. It can be more than one person, but that's something to think about. Elisa, oh, okay. I was like, is that definitely not, or you're willing? Okay, excellent.
Thanks, Elisa.
Yay.
We'd be happy to work with you on that.
Okay, perfect. You get to be our MVP. All
Elisa
right, well.
also asked really quick, I just wanted to mention, because she asked, how do you get access to these meetings, the Measure X Advisory Community meetings? They are publicly posted, similarly to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and it is posted with the other committees of the Board of Supervisors. You also can sign up to get the emails. And I believe you can do that there within the agenda system itself. If not, feel free to email me and I'd be happy to try to shepherd that request.
All right, well, it is 10 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, and I do want to thank you again for your time. I feel like we got what we needed. We learned stuff because we always learn stuff. And I do want to just point you again to the task force resource page that does have the full slide decks that were presented at the convening that Patience and I spoke about last week. And that's where we will put Lindy's slide deck that she presented from. And as always, we put everything that we talk about or present at our meetings. So, and there's Mark's got the link in the chat. So without further ado, have a very happy Wednesday. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, go get vaccinated. There's plentiful supply. So go do it. Thanks, everybody.